Hello, I'm Tiffany Neely, and welcome to CNS. During this edition, our reporters bring you up close to the faces and issues of your neighbors near and far. Through their stories, we bring facts, voices, and conflict while hoping you gain an understanding you may not have had before.
News is what's happening right now.
News is not just about informing people, but it's also about considering people's emotions.
Being a reporter means paying close attention to your immediate and distant environment and asking the questions that need to be asked.
I feel really privileged as a journalist because people trust me with their stories, and they also trust me to tell those stories to other people.
With CNS.
With CNS.
With CNS.
With CNS.
We are CNS. In the modern day United States, what happens when you're married, but you also want a career? Some may answer, of course you can have both. Partners don't have to feel inclined to stay out of the workplace to strictly be a homemaker anymore. Well, actually, as CNS reporter Neely tells us, some partners are having to stay homemakers just to keep calling the U.S. their home.
This is Anna, Karishma, and Akshita. All three women left their families to follow their husbands to the Silicon Valley. The problem? Well, while their husbands found good jobs, the three women aren't allowed to work.
After like dozen of interviews, I just gave up on that front because, at the stage when the employer was asking me like, what are your situation? I was like, I need a sponsorship to be able to work in America. And that was it. Like nobody wanted to contact me anymore. So I was frustrated. It was very frustrating.
So here's basically how they got into this situation. A few years ago in another country, a young woman met a young man. They fell in love and got married. It just so happened that the young man had managed to find a high-tech employer in the US who would sponsor a temporary visa called an H-1B, allowing him to work. Just so you know, most H-1B visa holders are from Asia and Europe. So anyway, our young man has his work authorization, but it turns out his dependents aren't eligible for the same thing when they move. At least not until he gets a green card, which nowadays could take up to 20 years.
Well, it's been 4 long years on H4, and it's definitely not been easy for me. Initially, I thought, oh wow, this was a vacation, but I finally realized it wasn't. You have a very dependent life, which is what I hate about it. Every day you're thinking of 10,000 things in your mind. Oh, maybe I could do this, maybe I could do this, maybe I could volunteer, but at the end of it, what are you doing? Like, where is it all going?
That sense of frustration has sparked a growing online movement to pass legislation that would let H-4 visa holders work before their spouses get that green card, part of President Obama's Startup America initiative.
So we brought a lot of people in on H-1B visas and other temporary visas. We never expanded the number of green cards available. So you have a mismatch between the influx and this pipe for green cards, which means that you have 1 million people now waiting for green cards, stuck in limbo.
There is some hope. If comprehensive immigration reform passes, some H-4 visa holders, like Karishma and Akshita, whose hubbies managed to squeeze into the long green card line, will be able to work. Meanwhile, Anna, whose husband hasn't been so lucky, spends her time, get this, volunteering for nonprofits that help women start their own businesses.
Back in Europe, I was very independent. Here, everything is up to my husband. I felt very sad and my self-esteem was very low. It's a horrible feeling.
And it doesn't help that Anna can't afford going back to school to get a degree that might help her get an H-1B. That's what Karishma's doing, although technical management is a subject she hardly enjoys. Going to school is expensive, and neither H-1B nor H-4 visa holders are eligible for financial aid. Outside loans must be co-signed by a, well, generous American citizen. But let's be real. Not everyone wants immigrants to work in the States in the first place.
There are a segment of Americans who believe that foreigners take their jobs away, that foreigners are evil. When the dot-com boom happened and we created all this amazing economic growth, it was foreign-born people who were at the helm of the startups that did all this. Every objective study you look at shows that immigrants make the pie bigger. It's not up for dispute, it's a fact.
Pie or no pie, some visa holders are just happy to be here.
I don't even think about all these things. Like, these are not at the top of my head. Oh, I'm financially dependent on my husband. My life is ruined. I'm not able to do anything. Cut the crap. I'm just happy. He takes care of me well, and I'm one of those lucky wives. That's all.
आदत हो गई है गरम गरम फुलकों की बोलो
My husband's dependent on me to take care of the house. That's how I'm dependent on him for things.
Who knows what'll happen in Washington? But if they could work, Anna would be an accountant, Karishma would open up her own restaurant, and Akshita, who's in beauty school, well, even she'd probably be working as a makeup artist.
Like, all my classmates are going to be working in one of the top salons in Bay Area and doing well for themselves. I feel bad about that.
Avni Nichawan, CNS.
It's common to turn on a screen or flip a page to find a story about another criminal caught. But the story rarely told is what happens afterward. What happens after the barred cell when that person is released back into society? CNS reporter Pendarvis Harshaw brings us the story of a young man who's dealing with that next step.
This is just one of many tours that visit UC Berkeley every day. But on this sunny spring day, the campus welcomed a group of men who've taken a slightly different path to the world of academia. The tour is a part of Alameda County's Probation Office's initiative to help young men get their lives back on track. It's called PROPS, or the Probation Rehabilitation Opportunity Program Services.
I'm one of several deputies, probation officers, that supervises young adults, ages 18 to 25 years old. We facilitate the cognitive behavioral life skill groups. These groups are weekly for 2 hours, and so we cover a variety of topics, such as anger management, violence prevention, drug awareness, job readiness, and etc.
If you got a probation officer that you can't reach, there's always another one on duty, right? You can come down here and leave a yellow card and say, I showed up today.
When we see people like Rinaldi who gets off probation early and still coming in to see the clients and do the early termination workshops, or just his support, or help coordinate field trip activities like to UC Cal Berkeley last week, or Berkeley City College. It's just a blessing.
Real briefly, my name is Rinaldi. I'm a graduate of this group, probation. I just got off paperwork. I had a 5-year felony for 2008 for a strong arm robbery. So they pretty much, instead of just throwing the book at me, they sat me down, gave me the county strike, which is a year in the county, and then a 5-year felony. So now I'm off probation and it's doable, so I'm here to let y'all know how to do it. Right? Today I just did an early termination workshop that was based on my experience from getting off probation early. How many of y'all want to get off probation early? Okay, how many of y'all believe y'all can get off probation early? Not as many hands. Being a felon, it's like, almost kind of like I can imagine being black in the 1800s, right? It's almost no way to come up out of it. This is something that's very short. You got a short window to do things in a certain way, and this will allow you to move on with the rest of your life. Well, when I got sentenced and I was sitting in jail, I just made a promise to myself that I wasn't ever coming back to jail, ever. So only way I could did that was I promised to myself that I was going to school, and I would just stay in school. I didn't care if I failed every one of my classes. I just wanted to go to school because I knew people that go to school, they don't really go to jail that much.
In addition to taking classes in the Peralta Community College system, Gilder says that it was the inspiration from a film that ultimately set him on his path.
When I was in college, one of my friends invited me to a film showing. It was Equinox. That was how I came across it.
You all will learn the courage of a King David, the discipline of Malcolm X, and the compassion of Desmond Tutu. There won't be anything on this planet after this program that you cannot accomplish. But you won't learn this just through lectures. You will have assignments that will be completed only by using the spirit of manhood. Will you make it?
From there, I knew this was real. I knew I could do this for the rest of my life, and I could just do that and I would be cool. I wouldn't have to go back to jail no more.
The message for me that I wanted people to run with was really, we have to train boys to be men. That boys don't become men through osmosis. As black men are in the lives of young black boys consistently, we absolutely know for a fact that that drops the delinquency and the criminal behavior of those young black men.
Gilder has recently earned a certificate in violence prevention strategies from the Peralta school system. He continues to volunteer, organize, and mentor young men in the position similar to the one that he once found himself in. And although Gilder has struggled academically, he says that he plans to continue his educational pursuits and is even considering applying to UC Berkeley. Pendarvis Harshaw, CNS.
A tangled web of debt and responsibility leaves domestic animals at the mercy of a financial system that doesn't have a clear plan for them. Tawanda Kanema walks us through this maze with some key figures in the path for justice.
As the economy crashed in 2007, Beth DiCaprio had no idea that the repercussions would reach all the way to her 50-acre ranch in Northern California.
You knew it was going to be bad. I don't think we could have ever seen how bad it would be.
Beth runs the Grace Foundation, a nonprofit that adopts animals from owners who have fallen on hard times. It started small. Beth collected animals, many of them starving and abused. Today, there are 250 horses, 12 cattle, 13 dogs, 1 large sheep, and a rooster named David Bowie.
So right now we have dozens of volunteers, maybe a dozen a week instead of hundreds of weeks a week, and it's been very, very difficult.
I was 12 years old when I started volunteering at Grace Foundation, and that just continued to chain up through for another 2 years until I moved away from Grace. So I found another horse ranch, and that didn't really kick off for me as well because the people were different,
Our biggest challenges is getting enough donations for the feeding and care of these horses, because we go through quite a bit of feed for these horses on a monthly basis.
Those volunteers help Beth stay afloat as expenses rise. Her good works are legend in the area, to the point that Wells Fargo Bank, the original Pony Express, rewarded her with a prize for exemplary citizenship.
We were given awards from them, and they credited us with being so important in the community, and yet when it came down to the bottom line of them having to come out of pocket for money for animals that they put themselves in that position, they had no problem and put it on the shoulders of a nonprofit and burying that nonprofit.
The trouble started when 2 banks, Wells Fargo and Bank of America, foreclosed on a ranch 3 hours north of Sacramento.
There were about 60 horses on the property at that time, and unfortunately there were over 23 dead, lying dead on the ground. There were many burial pits, and so we knew that, dozens and dozens of horses had passed on the property. We were requested to take just the 4 worst horses that day.
But within months, 56 horses from the foreclosed property were living at the Grace Foundation. Their care and feeding could run as high as $18,000 a month.
We've spent 20 months keeping these animals alive. We are forced to continue to care for them, which we want to continue to care for them. They refuse to pay for the cost of what is incurred.
The horses do not legally belong to the Grace Foundation, so soon Beth's insurance company refused to insure those animals. For 6 months, the ranch was closed to visitors, volunteers, and veterinarians.
We know that over 500 animals have died since this has happened.
Beth DiCaprio spent that time agonizing over the costs and urgency of caring for the animals. Many of them pregnant mares rescued from the Susanville Ranch and almost ready to fall.
And what we have is a fight of our lives in trying to keep those babies alive and these mothers alive. And horses are extremely expensive, and they have left this in our lap.
Feeling the weight of their responsibilities and resisting pressures from the insurance company and the banks, DiCaprio made a risky decision.
We just started back our therapy program because it was there was just nowhere else for these kids to go. We kind of broke the rules a little bit and decided to add that back up. We still care for the 250 animals. You know, who would want a 30-year-old horse? You know, there's going to be simply no place for them to go. And so we have to find a way. I mean, we just do.
Tawanda Kanema, CNS.
Some call it soccer, most call it football. Either way, it claims the title as the most popular sport in the world. CNS reporters Deborah Silva and Lauren Kawana traveled to a city in Brazil, preparing itself for the biggest tournament of the sport, the World Cup. There they found more than just the love of the game. Instead, are residents swinging in a balance of opportunities and obstacles.
In Brazil, soccer is everywhere. In 2014, the country will host the World Cup, or Copa do Mundo. The opening match will be held in São Paulo, Brazil's thriving economic center and home to nearly 12 million people. Many are busy preparing for the opportunities that the World Cup will bring, including this group of taxi drivers, which is racing to learn the language they will need to welcome thousands of visitors.
Taxi, taxi, taxi. Taxi, are you free?
Yes.
Please.
Get in. Ma'am, can I help you with your...
Oh, thank you.
Enjoy your...
Oh, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I like learning English because it's important and it will help me make much money in the World Cup. There are more than 10 million cars in São Paulo.
Now that he knows English, Oséias expects at least a 30% increase in his business. To get closer to the action, we drove east of São Paulo City to Itaquera, where residents are watching the construction of a $400 million stadium in their own backyards.
This is the Arena Corinthians, the future site of the World Cup's opening match. Construction started in 2011 and should be finished by the end of the year. Around 3,000 people have found work here.
This group of immigrant workers from Haiti is an example of many who were recruited to build the stadium.
Ouviu aqui São Paulo é cidade que tem mais econômica do Brasil. Falou vou São Paulo porque eu venho aqui São Paulo.
The event is putting Itaquera on the map and filling the district's coffers.
Houve um deslocamento de investimentos públicos e privados muito grande. Provavelmente não vai haver nunca mais outra injeção de recursos tão grande quanto a que está havendo nesses dias.
Itaquera resident Luciana Alves can see the stadium from her veranda and plans to cash in on the soccer frenzy.
Então aqui é uma vista privilegiada do estádio.
She and her husband will rent their home for 2,000 reais, or about $1,000 a day.
This is my room. This is my kitchen. Bedroom.
Extra bedroom.
Option bedroom.
Just down the hill from Luciana's home is a favela, or slum, one of 6 in Itaquera's district.
Mais que nada, sai da minha frente que eu quero passar, pois o samba está animado e o que eu quero é sambar. Este samba que é misto de maracatu e universal, samba de preto velho, samba de preto.
About 300 families have made their homes here, in Comunidade da Paz, or Community of Peace. But the city wants to revitalize the area, especially with thousands of visitors coming for the World Cup next year. Residents must now face the challenge of finding a new place to call home.
Vai, vem aqui.
Since 2004, the city planned to expand an existing park and move residents out of the favela.
Então já estava previsto, antes mesmo de ter a notícia de que o estádio seria ali, era uma área que necessitaria de uma intervenção urbana. Não é uma ação, portanto, nem da nossa gestão, né, de forma nenhuma, nem prevista em função da Copa.
Residents think differently. They say the city only began to take action last year.
O poder público, eles estão querendo abafar, que não é pela Copa que eles vão tirar a gente daqui. É sim pela Copa.
Eu me sinto ameaçada. Eu me sinto, sabe, oprimida. Para onde nós vai?
Se a gente vai brigar com o poder público para que ele garanta residência, moradia de qualidade, nada mais justo e correto que a comunidade esteja junto para brigar junto nisso. Então,
with no direction from the government, community groups started organizing residents to devise a housing plan.
Se tem verba para fazer estádio, se tem verba para fazer parque linear, tem que ter verba para moradia, que era a prioridade.
Their plan would move only half of the families out of the park's way and place them in housing on a nearby plot of government land. City officials responded to community activism by calling a meeting where residents could speak out.
Bom dia, o meu nome é Drancy, né? Eu sou tumor da Viela da Paz. Moro lá há 18 anos. Moramos de 300 famílias, aproximadamente. Eu acho que nós temos direito de saber para onde a gente vamos. Nós queremos habitação.
Drancy Silva was born with a physical disability and is currently unemployed. But he often serves as the favela electrician, hooking new residents up to clandestine power from a nearby city-owned power line.
Não sei. Conserto, pagava um aluguel, já estava ficando caro. Aí eu resolvi chegar.
Drancy signed up for subsidized housing 7 years ago, but he's still waiting.
O meu maior sonho é um apartamento. Desde o primeiro dia que eu pisei o pé aqui, eu tinha uma intenção na cabeça.
Drancy has 2 children with Diana do Nascimento, another long-time resident of Favela da Paz. They share the dream of owning a decent home.
Porque é um lugar que não tem dignidade. É um lugar que não tem energia legalizada. Só é tijolo, alvenaria, e outra é madeira. Porque eu penso em fazer e, ao mesmo tempo, falar vai sair. Aí eu vou jogar meu dinheiro fora.
While Diana and other residents are waiting for the government to provide proper housing, the city has yet to start building.
Você diria 1 ano, 2 anos que eles teriam essa habitação ou não tem nenhuma ideia?
Não, eu acredito, assim, por avaliação pessoal, que demore em torno de 1 ano a 1 ano e meio.
Eu não quero passar isso aqui. Isso aqui é uma filmagem.
Drancy has taken photos of the place where the government says they will build new housing, but he doesn't believe it will be ready for several years. In the meantime, city officials say they will provide rental stipends, known as Bolsa Aluguel, a temporary solution that residents reject.
Um valor irrisório, um valor que não dá para pagar um aluguel. Eles vão, chama separar a gente. Ele dá bolsa aluguel para cada um, é tipo assim, se vira. Eu não vou saber onde a minha filha está, a minha filha está morando em outro bairro, eu estou morando em outro bairro, se espalhou todo mundo.
Pela senda alegre, tu caminharás.
When night falls, the community of Favela da Paz often gathers in their church.
Aqui nós estamos aqui para pregar a palavra do Senhor, né? Para as pessoas que estão aqui, para que elas tenham um pouco mais de força, ânimo, né? E tudo por causa de um campo de futebol, de um monte de homem correndo atrás de uma bola. Vão fazer um estádio para fazer festa aí para as pessoas, festa por alguns dias aí, né? E depois vai se acabar e as pessoas como é que ficam, né? Estou pedindo muito a Deus que, quando isso vier a acontecer, que cada família dessa comunidade aqui, ela vá para sua casa, ela tenha uma moradia digna, né? Tenha uma condição de vida melhor.
While they are waiting for their prayers to be answered, the people of Favela da Paz dream of a fulfilling life.
Como eu me enxergo daqui 5 anos? Nós temos que chegar com um futuro melhor. Daqui 5 anos, se tiver indo do estádio, eu estou vendendo água e suco e refrigerante na porta do estádio. Para subir de vida. E eu dizer, eu morei aqui, em Itaquera, eu vi uma coluna sendo enfincada aqui no estádio do Corinthians.
Welcome to the world, God's in Brazil. Welcome people of the world in Brazil. Welcome to the cup of the world, Brazil.
For CNS, this is Deborah Silva.
In Brazil.
Thank you for joining us for another edition of CNS News. Be sure to check in next time to share stories from around the globe.